What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Yesterday was an interesting one because now we have reports around Sony starting up early development of a new handheld, not one that would stream, but one that would be more of a successor to the Vita. We're going to go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about some new evidence around a certain Microsoft first-party game indeed making the jump to PlayStation and Switch. And then we also have some analysts' opinions around Nintendo's next device that's certainly causing a lot of frustration online, but I think there's a bit more to that whole situation. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. We know that there is a Sony State of Play coming up next week on the 8th, and apparently there's going to be some news that we want to tune in and not miss, which, I mean, let's face it sounds like there's a demo of some kind, right? Well, it appears we have the file size at least popping up, which we can see this posted up over on X. This is from PlayStation Game Size with Rebirth coming in at 145.25 gigabytes. Now, they did say it's on 2 Blu-ray discs, so it's not surprising here that's over 100 gigabytes, but yeah, 145. Whew, want to make sure you have some room for that one. I mean, like, Jedi Survivor was 150 or so gigabytes. That's just where we are. Game sizes continue to balloon, but something else followed this. Yeah, it looks like, according to them, we also have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth demo. And to go a step further, it sounds like our save data will be transferring over. So this continues the trend that Square Enix has done with a lot of their games, a demo, but one that will also then play into the full game. So basically we'll be able to get a head start on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I assume it's going live during or after that State of Play on the 8th, so give us a few weeks to get acclimated at least to the beginning of the game before it launches later on in February, and I cannot wait. Really excited to check this one out. Also, speaking of demos, we have one from Nintendo as well. This was posted up on their official account, saying we're breaking down some of the ins and outs of puzzling in Mario vs. Donkey Kong. That's coming to Nintendo Switch on February 16th. Play through a selection of levels and modes in the Mario vs. Donkey Kong free demo. It's available right now on the Switch eShop, which is a remake of a Game Boy Advance game. This one has 4 playable levels, casual and classic difficulty, and a 2-player mode, all in this demo. So at least it'll give you a feel for the game, although there's just a lot out right now. So this is one that I'm at least gonna pass on for now, but the demo, I at least downloaded to check it out, and yeah, it's very reminiscent, go figure, of the Game Boy Advance game, which was a really, really cool title then, but it translating over to the Switch, maybe for like the newer generation of gamers, it'd be a hit, but again, for now, I just talked about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm thinking more about that in February than I am for Mario vs. Donkey Kong, but if you're a fan of puzzle games, definitely download the demo to check it out. Oh, and it sounds like we may have quietly had a PlayStation 6 game get announced. This was part of that State of Play, actually. In fact, we can see this posted up over on Kojima's X account, where he says it'll be, this is the new espionage IP, by the way, saying it'll be an original IP since the establishment of Kojima Productions. It's the 3rd one. It's a completely new action espionage for the next generation. It'll be created using cutting-edge technology and the best talents from around the world, both from film and video games. So obviously that part about next generation is what makes people think, oh, this is a PlayStation 6 game. Really, it should just be game development and how long it takes in general, and clearly where this is right now in that timetable and how it's not even going into full production until Death Stranding 2 is out, which is next year. You just kind of line all that up and it sounds like a 2030 game, which is when we would assume the PlayStation 6 would be on the market. So yeah, most likely Kojima just announced a PlayStation 6 game during that State of Play. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Sony and a report around a handheld that is starting at least the planning and production phase. Now we know behind the scenes, R&D is taking place at all times with these different companies, Nintendo, Microsoft, Sony. Doesn't necessarily mean that that hardware ever sees the light of day, but of course they are kicking around ideas in the background, even coming up with full prototypes at times. However, let's talk about how Sony could be re-entering the handheld scene. We can see this posted up. This is over on Insider Gaming, where they say, according to known hardware leaker, Moore's Law is dead. A non-streaming console is in the works at Sony that would natively support and play games. That's right, it would not be streaming games like that PlayStation Portal device, which is essentially a controller with a screen. They say in his report, MLID says the device will have a custom AMD APU that is currently in the high-level design phase and is at least 2 years out and technically not greenlit for launch yet. It's also mentioned that based on talking with developers, new handheld could maintain native backward compatibility with PlayStation 4 games while receiving a Pro-like patch for PlayStation 5. So a lot to take in here. I mean, going in the high-level design phase, yeah, at least 2 years out, maybe longer. And the fact that it's not necessarily greenlit for launch yet means that it's something we just never see happen. Because I think there are many factors here if Sony does go forward with it. One, how would it line up with their PlayStation 6 launch? Because if it's at least 2 years out, I'm going to say it's probably 3 to 4 years out. And would Sony be interested in launching a handheld next to their PlayStation 6 system? Well, I feel like if it could just play the same games and they basically make their own Steam Deck, why not, I guess? That, I think, is the biggest thing that's held Sony back, is that technology just isn't there yet. And it's not that Sony's admitting this. Valve has admitted this with the Steam Deck. That's one of the reasons we have the Steam Deck OLED rather than the Steam Deck 2. They themselves said, hey, the AMD APU, the technology they're working on, it's just not available yet. But because of how many companies are currently involved with AMD making all these handhelds, this is where the overall R&D would start to accelerate because, well, there's money to be made here. And that specifically applies to AMD, who just appears to be providing these low-power chips to everyone. But I think Sony would come in and more or less make their own custom APU, not use one that's more off the shelf like this Z1 Extreme that's just kind of getting passed around right now. The idea, though, of it needing a Pro-like patch to work on it does, I think, throw a bit of a monkey wrench into the entire plan. I mean, sure, it would still be playing the same games, but there would be a little more work. It's kind of like how the Steam Deck has, like, the Steam Deck compatibility. It's fully set up for it, right? It's Steam Deck compatible, and you'll look for that on Steam. And then while some games are not, they do work, but there's some weird hiccups at times with controls, or maybe some of the resolution or the refresh rate settings. So with Sony's case, they would want to make sure everyone is Vita 2 compatible. The other facet here would be, how much would it cost? Because I kind of think it would cost the same amount as the console, but we're also in a world where Sony has charged more money for a VR headset than the PlayStation 5. So I guess technically that wouldn't be a massive stopping point for them, but I would like to see this happen, even if it's something that wouldn't come out until 2028 or 2029, mostly because I think just more competition in this handheld market is just a good thing. And I think we're getting to the point where these low-power chips are quickly catching up alongside diminishing returns to where there's just not as much of a difference because we're not really going past 4K. At least people don't really have the demand for 8K or 16K or anything like that. So we're kind of at this sticking point where it's like, okay, what else can we do? Well, what about convenience? I mean, handheld devices seem to be working right now for people who want to play games on the go or even just around the house without relying on a TV. But will Sony decide to greenlight this thing, provided this is all correct information? That remains to be seen at this point, and actually provides a pretty good out for Moore's Law is dead in the sense that, well, it was in development, but they didn't greenlight it, so that's why you never actually heard about it, but it was a legit report. I guess we'll see as we go along, but I'm not expecting it for this generation. I think it'd be something that we would find out more about towards the PlayStation 6 launch that I'm not expecting until 2028 or even 2029. Next up, let's talk about the continuing shift for Microsoft when it comes to their physical games just existing, as it does seem like Microsoft obviously is moving more and more towards that all-digital future at an accelerated rate right now. And obviously them leaning into the subscription service with something like Game Pass is just continuing to push people on their platform towards an all-digital library. Well, According to GamesIndustry.biz and Christopher Dring, seems like at least in Europe, many of the retailers are just getting away from physical Xbox games. We can see this posted up. This is over on VGC, who did transcribe the discussion here, again from Christopher Dring, saying, I got told by a major publisher just before Christmas that across Europe, several retailers have started not listing Xbox anymore. So they've just started not stocking Xbox games anymore. Xbox is such a digital console. The physical performance of games is really low. And ultimately, when you're selling a console that most people are just downloading games for, it doesn't really benefit the retailer very much. The margin on hardware is often quite small. I wasn't able to corroborate that. I couldn't find which retailer these are, but it was a proper senior European publishing boss who said it to me. So yeah, the margin on hardware is very small. In fact, back when I would do ordering for stores, it turns out when you pay for the shipping on top of it, you would lose money on some of these new consoles. The reason we would keep new consoles in stock is because we wanted to sell used games and accessories, specifically headsets. Like the headsets that you walk in and buy that were like the $20 or $25 ones, kind of cheap, and they'd plug in your controller. They cost us like $9.50 and we'd sell it for $20. So that's a pretty good margin. Whereas the console would end up being, let's say it was an Xbox One and it sold for $500 with the Kinect, cost us after shipping $502 and some change. So yeah, it wasn't exactly the best business move on its own, but the things surrounding it is why we would stock them, right? Bring people in and then tack on all kinds of stuff on top of it. You might get sick hearing about how much money we made off those AA batteries we try to sell people from the register. But nonetheless, once the games themselves, physical games, start to go away, retailers really won't have much of a reason to carry consoles. And this is something we're going to keep an eye on here with Xbox first, because one of the reasons I think Microsoft is looking to start the next generation sooner rather than later, apparently in 2026, is to get the all-digital side of things rolling and have you more reliant on subscription and just digital libraries as opposed to also buying on disc, which means I don't think the next system is going to have a disk drive, and that's just kind of it. So something to keep an eye on here when it comes to retailers, see if we have any announcements or more people just noticing that there aren't games in stock. In fact, let me know down in the comments if you've been out to a Target, a Best Buy, a Walmart. Take a look at the Xbox section, see how things are looking, because some of the Walmarts and stuff I've gone to recently, they don't really have a lot of Xbox games out, and I think that's just kind of something we're going to be getting more and more used to as we go forward. Next up, let's talk about a big Microsoft first-party game that had a recent update. People started to go through the files and realized we may have some certain images and designs that are specific to different platforms. Now, this was posted up. We can see this over on Wario64's account. It was spread all over the place as it appeared on Reddit and then apparently Tumblr, but you can see 9 different images here, and this is from the recent update for Hi-Fi Rush. We can see Shadow Drop with the kind of the green background there. That would obviously be for Xbox. Then we have the blue I'm Here Baby with Chai kind of posing like Cloud from Final Fantasy. That seems like something that would be set up for PlayStation. Next to that this is simply Unreal crossed out Epic. That would be for the Epic Games Store. And then we have Be Positive, overwhelmingly, that'd be for Steam. And then Rock Out Anywhere with the red background, that would most likely be for the Switch. So yeah, it seems right now that Hi-Fi Rush is probably the Xbox or Microsoft first-party game that people have been discussing after rumors went out that Microsoft was looking to have one of their big games, or their more celebrated games, I should say, that was in the Game of the Year conversation, go third party, or just be on more platforms. And sure, Hi-Fi Rush, I think, would do incredibly well on the Switch. I think the audience is set up nicely to probably buy several copies of Hi-Fi Rush, but it would probably do pretty well on PlayStation also. And sure, I guess it could act as advertising for Microsoft with that, but I think at this time, if you were going to play Hi-Fi Rush, you've probably already either bought an Xbox, bought it on PC, or signed up for Game Pass to do so, and they're just looking really for brand recognition, building out this new intellectual property that maybe they'll continue building on top of, and just brand awareness for Xbox and technically then Game Pass. Now, when would they make this announcement? Because there have been some questions around these images in particular. However, I can tell you, based on some more information getting out there, these files are legit. They are in the update most recently for the game, as more data mining has occurred, not just from that Tumblr post. So when would this be announced? Well, probably, we'll say next week, maybe in a Nintendo Direct. That's kind of the going theory right now, as there are rumors that a Direct would be happening in the next 10 days or so, and I'm kind of thinking it would line up next week ahead of Nintendo's big, their investors or financial reports, as they may have some stuff in that Direct that they may want to point out in their reports and that sort of thing. So really in the first half of February, but then process elimination, I'm thinking maybe next Tuesday or Wednesday. It's just a guess for now, but maybe in that Direct, you see Hi-Fi Rush pop up, and then after the Direct, you see it also get confirmed for PlayStation. So I guess keep an eye out. It seems like Hi-Fi Rush is going to be popping up in a whole bunch of other places outside of Xbox soon. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about some analysts that Bloomberg brought together who discussed the idea that Nintendo's next system might not be as successful as their current system with the Switch. This seemed to cause quite the reaction online of people yelling about these analysts saying that Nintendo's next system would fail, but I read this completely different than I think most people did. Let's take a look though. This posted up, we can see over on Go Nintendo. Again, Bloomberg decided to go around and get opinions on how I would say investors should approach Nintendo stock specifically, as we are heading towards what most people figure is a new console generation starting up at the end of this year. This one is from Goldman Sachs, says, in our 5-year earnings estimates, we do not see profits during the next generation hardware cycle surpassing peak profits of the Nintendo Switch cycle. They say this could change if the hardware turns out to be new concept hardware rather than a successor along the same lines as the Nintendo Switch. We also have, I'm going to say, McGuire Group saying we do not think the new console will be as successful as the Switch and see potential profit-taking after the announcement. Now, people looked at this and said, oh, these analysts are saying that the next system is going to fail. Well, let's think about from their angle. They are more or less looking at this for probabilities, as in, if I were to tell very wealthy clients, would it be better to put more money into the stock or remove money after an announcement that we assume is going to be an iterative concept? I would tell them to remove money because I don't see them in a year of R&D and production for the console, where typically it does cost quite a bit more money. There's more expenses, as we've seen Nintendo kind of talk about this and show in their books, to get these systems out and ready to go to the finish line, you can say, and then released. But I also think is it really a weird thing to say that Nintendo's next system might not reach, say, the console sales that we see for the Switch now, that we all kind of think at this point has the opportunity to go on to be the best-selling console of all time, surpassing the DS and the PS2? Because then if the next system sells 120 or 130 million systems, that seems like a pretty good generation in general, right? Technically, then the analyst would still be correct in the sense of raw console sales, because it wouldn't have reached, say, 160 million. Now, also, when it comes to profit around software, it is still hard to say, because I think Nintendo is growing out as more of an entertainment company when it comes to movies, theme parks, and other collaborative initiatives, other things they're doing there. So it's hard to say really when it comes to the overall profit of the company, because I think they'll be growing in many different directions outside of just their console. But from a raw sales estimate, I don't think it's incorrect to say, okay, it's more likely than not that the next system does not go on and sell 170 million systems, we'll say, to surpass the current Switch when it's all said and done. So I don't really see this as them saying it's going to fail, because if the next system sells 130, 140 million, they'd be right, and then the next system would still be very successful. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, if Sony announced a $500 handheld that could play their console games, would you buy it? 57% say no, 43% say yes. I think you could also look into that as some of the third-party games that are out there as well. I mean, look, if Sony does a handheld and we see where pricing is currently on some of these higher-end models like the ROG Ally, the Lenovo's Legion Go, you see the Steam Deck, $500 is probably expected. I mean, even if Nintendo shows up with their $400 handheld, we assume years from now Sony would show up with a more powerful system than the Switch 2, which 2024 versus obviously like maybe 2028. There's a pretty large gap there in terms of R&D and development over the course of 3 to 4 years. But that price tag would come with it. And it wouldn't shock me if it would be $500. And that's kind of where we are with the handheld. If it plays a lot of their first party games, patch dependent apparently, and then third party stuff, yeah, I would probably pick one up to check it out, obviously for the channel, but also I think it'd be really fun to have a successor to the Vita after all these years. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from G Mace, who says, say you're making Metal Gear without saying you're making Metal Gear. Kojima, I got this. Yeah, and then he went on to retweet everyone on X and Twitter who were saying, oh, he just announced a new Metal Gear game without saying the title. And people were putting out all kinds of sketches and concept art and stuff from Metal Gear, and he was retweeting that. It's like, okay, Kojima, we get it. You're gonna maybe rein things in a bit from, I mean, he just went crazy with Death Stranding too. He's like, what's supernatural? You know, like, let me take that even to the next level with Higgs playing an actual electric guitar and fighting against a cyborg with a sword. I feel like he's always wanted to go back to doing that espionage, action, cinematic style game. It's just, Metal Gear Solid was so ahead of its time back on the PS1 and then with the PS2. Why not go back and remake it with what we're seeing now with current technology, not just Metal Gear, but just that overall genre, that espionage, action, narrative, adventure experience. I think for next gen, he could do some very impressive stuff, especially kind of on his own along with Sony's backing. So yeah, it's Metal Gear without calling it Metal Gear. It's just also probably something we won't see until like 2028, 2029, when he's ready to start hyping it up. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Whether Sony potentially re-entering the handheld market with what could be a successor to the Vita, just one that would also play their console games. Then also, what about Hi-Fi Rush seemingly on track to appear on the PlayStation and the Switch? Or are you thinking about buying it on either of those platforms? Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.